where's this passage from?
Justice yeah, I'm still in the justice section. This will be, it's a big passage, but and it's actually, the question is fairly small. You can ignore this because that's not my question. We've spoken about this before.
Bromas can not reasonable judgments.
The key of the passage is that he's saying that, you know, differentiating between a hero and a villain is easy, but most men are mixed, they're gray, and they have constituent elements of black and white. And these are the most difficult cognitively, because you must go, you know, you need to work out which rules, what aspect of a person's character, what elements are more basic. There's a lot more questions and observations and inferences and so on. So my question is not a big one. It's just, have you found fiction has helped your ability to judge people? And I don't mean judge in the sense of coming to some final conclusion, but judge in evaluating what elements of their personality are more significant than others. And can you point to specific instances that you have in mind? So this is not just a yes or no question, but can you think of specific instances where there is a character from fiction which you have then used to make an accurate observation about some person that you've actually met?
I would say fiction only helps me think of examples of what to consider or specific examples of people, but how to judge, probably not. I think experience with people is the best way for that. Just actually looking at the people in front of me is practice judging, not just taking into account concepts I think are relevant or certain specific behavior patterns, but actually the complexity of judging people, I've learned more from actually talking to people in front of me.
Okay, but no, so fiction hasn't helped you in that process.
I mean, not to tell me what is in fact relevant, just that what are questions I might ask.
Yeah,
that's usually what fiction has helped me do.
What are the questions that you've asked? What do you mean by that?
Like, what sort of choices they make, what kind of values they hold. I might consider how do they act in a group of people? Like, do I consider, like, I might consider what a character in a story may vest themselves or considered. I might pose that question as a type of observation somebody might have, or some other action, or some other way of acting that people might choose. So it gives me more considerations of the possibilities of human action and justification, reasoning, and all that stuff.
Okay.
But I've always needed to concretize it. That's what always made the biggest difference in how to judge people, is actually meeting people and seeing them do things and needing to judge them.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Just so clarity around a disvalue is a taking away of value. It's like an active thing, right? It's not a lack of value. It's like, it is bad and against my values. That's what a disvalue is when we talk about a punishment is a disvalue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, like what about not allowing something to someone? For example, what would be an example of not allowing someone to have something that I can?
I mean, the most obvious case would be that somebody needs a house, homeless, and you don't let them have it because they don't have enough money. I mean, that's the most in direct case of saying that case you're giving an example of.
But is that a that's not a, like, if, because there's a difference between taking away something someone has versus just not giving them, right? So a disvalue is only when you take away, but.
Or it actively causes some frustration of your values. in the
Okay.
other direction. Obviously, punishing somebody, like, I don't know, stabbing them so that they can't do something, then that's a disvalue to them because it's inflicted on them to prevent them acquiring value that is something that actively takes them away from the pursuit of life and flourishing.
Right. Right. Okay. But to, if you like, like to take a silly example, like there's a cookie in the cookie jar and your mom doesn't let you, you're like a kid and your mom doesn't let you have the cookie. Is that a disvalue? Like,
I mean, I think the punishment would be, depending on what the punishment is. I mean, you could say that the difficult part is to what extent is it proper that your mom prevents you from eating the cookie? In what ways can they actually legitimately prevent you from having it? I mean, you could say it's a disvalue because it's not a desirable thing. You actively don't want to be punished.
right. Okay. But,
Disvalue because it actively frustrates you and prevents you from attaining your values.
and that, yeah. Okay. So your mum is the disvalue at this point in not
Or at least
opening the jar. The action
Yeah, or at
of
least
not. Okay.
yeah.
She's like, even like putting aside whether it's proper or not, just in terms of value, like if
Yeah.
the value, you don't have the cookie yet, but the problem is the disvalue. Is that correct? Is it
Yeah. I would
the
say
fact that, yeah.
the disvalue is the thing that denies or prevents even the acquisition of value, like actively
Okay.
preventing it.
Okay. Right.
You desire and you're actively prevented from acquiring the cookie.
Right. All right.
It's just a question of if that's the proper way to raise a kid, but that would be an example of a disvalue, regardless if it's right or wrong.
Right. Okay. So this is a question about, this is obviously the context is justice, and it talks about requiting the positive and the negative with negative. And then it's saying this is the truth behind the rule, an eye for an eye. And obviously an eye for an eye is ancient wisdom. It's from the Bible. And so there is a certain, it's not like we've reached any of these virtues in a vacuum and just induced them from scratch. Maybe some element of that, but there is some, like, obviously humans till this point have come up with some actual valuable observations and principles that are useful in conduct human, that are useful for beneficial human conduct and managing society, for example, like, I don't know, democratic republic. And so my question is, like, are there any other good sources to find that kind of ancient wisdom that then feeds into all these more objective type virtues? So it will give you a much better grounding of where, what context it came up in, or like little statements like an eye for an eye, little cute formulations of these kind of things. I called it ancient text mining without all the crap of the irrelevant. Do you know of anything that will further substantiate these kind of observations and give the historical context that will let you understand them much more too?
It's hard to say. Do you mean more like one-liners, or just what do you even mean like
Both
mythology?
one-liners, not only one-liners, but also because one-liners would be good for memory, right? To help you keep certain things in memory, but more so like the kind of books that scour all the biblical and ancient texts for these kind of objective principles for human conduct, or for that make life more fulfilling, and that are common across different cultures and in different periods. And so it gives it basically like a much more historical treatment that lets you understand where all this stuff comes from. Because I find it it's pretty like I mean so, some of it I'm just saying, yeah, it makes sense, but how did we get here? And then also like there are just too many questions I have that I feel like might start getting more answered if I look at if I get a more in-depth historical understanding of how we get to these.
It's a hard question because you probably could find it in any ancient kind of text. Well, I
Right.
think any ancient Greek myth can give you some of that, or reading the
Oh,
Bible
okay.
too can give you some of that. Despite
Okay.
its many flaws, there's
Yeah.
many more quotes in the Bible that
Right.
resemble that.
Right.
There's, I mean, I can think of more modern examples that are short and pithy. Like Nietzsche does a bunch of those sort of things, but that's not any ancient analysis. That's
Right.
just the way he writes.
Give me an
I could
example
think
from
of,
Nietzsche
well, like
before you.
that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Oh, and what
That
would
was
that be
his
reflecting?
determination, or even integrity sometimes, or at least
Okay.
just that willpower to go on.
We discussed willpower at the end of. We
Yeah,
said it was a.
yeah. Or we could think of older texts like um, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He has some interesting things
Okay.
like that. Probably a bunch of other Greek or Roman philosophers tend to use that sort of. They tend to use something like that, or at least have some line that
Yeah.
really sticks out.
Okay. Well, it's I don't know. I mean, what you're saying though is that uh it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I don't know if what I'm looking for actually exists because I don't necessarily want to scour through every,
Yeah,
I don't want to start reading through the Bible, for example.
there must be a book out there that collects some of it, but I don't know one right now.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. All right. Let's see. Okay, so this is talking about um, well, let's read it together because I
Yeah,
was confused about.
affects the reality. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so I'm just confused, like how you turn so virtue into a liability and evil into an asset. I'm confused by that because
yeah,
what it's saying is that if I confer values on other good people on bad people, suddenly evil becomes virtue and virtue becomes evil. And I'm like, well, how can that can't happen? So I'm not really like I can see that, okay, evil is now gaining, but why does virtue suddenly become a liability? Like why is virtue a negative when someone's made a mistake by giving to evil? If
well,
I'm not sure I'm understanding this passage basically, like how
okay, do
this
you remember
happens.
that the passage where he talked about why um, cheating would basically be putting the unreal as more important than the real, or that the facts of reality are, in fact, a barrier to attaining what you want? Do you remember talking about that?
Yeah, I do. So that was in honesty, I think we were talking
Yeah.
about like, yeah.
So, I mean, that's an example of like flipping or distorting the nature of values. That the act of cheating is at least implicitly affirming that you believe that disvalue, or that virtues and values are, or the truth of reality is getting in the way, that is preventing this acquisition of value. So you need to evade or deny something about how you attain values.
Right.
And you're just putting it on its head and changing how it works. And that you're doing it like once you view that what your desires are above reality, you have to go against reality necessarily. That reality is the barrier to your desires rather than a way into consideration. So I'm saying it's similar to that, where if you're trying to say that you want to benefit things that are against life in some way, you are benefiting them. You are seeking to put them above values that are positive or life affirming. That is a similar sort of reversal of values. And by reversing it like that, the virtue is the barrier to the things you want. You want to provide or gain value through interacting with the evil in a way that acting virtuously would go against acquiring values through them, that you are going against your values, which have been reversed, and evil is what you desire, and virtue is a mean that is a way to frustrate attaining your values. That by being honest and having integrity would be liabilities to seeking value in this world where the evil hold the value to interact with evil to get what you want. That evil is the source of values in a way that you've got to be evil to acquire their values, and you're acting against virtue, and it builds from there.
Okay, so I'm getting lost somewhere earlier in this
Okay.
point you made, which is where I'm stuck. What I'm stuck on is like this is what's going on in my mind. I'm thinking of so let's say someone's made a mistake, and we can maybe think of a good example of someone who's like, well, it is true that this race has had a lot of this class of people has had a lot of problems and suffering, and so I'm going to pick for this job someone who is from that class, and I'm going to pick the best person from that class, and I'm doing it because they have we moved to this country, and we when the settlers came to this country, and they gave this class of people a very difficult time, and so it makes sense that we're trying to bring someone, try to bring them back into culture and society so they benefit too. And so I'm going to select someone just from this class of people, but I'm going to select the best person. And so I'm bringing that up as an issue of okay, well, here is a case of maybe someone who is trying to how is he, I'm trying to put this in concrete terms, because if someone's, let's say that is a mistake, and even that's not, I can't make the case yet for something like that as being a mistake, but let's say it's an injustice. And that's what I'm assuming without going into, I'm assuming that as a context without argument, because I can't make an argument about that yet. But let's say we assume that that is a case of injustice. How does virtue then become a liability? I'm not, it's not clear to me, where in that case of you hiring the best person within a certain race or group of people, and you're doing it for good intentions, where is the switch from virtue to does that make sense?
I have a hard time answering it because I doubt that it's wrong to do that. So it's hard to think of.
All right, well, let's use a different example then. I was trying to think of something where someone is not intentionally doing an injustice, but someone who is unintentionally committing an injustice. All right, maybe a loafing relative. We can take the example from Atlas Shrugged. Reardon, constantly, what's his name? Philip. I think he's called Philip.
Yeah.
Philip. Is it Philip Larkin or Philip? No, Philip Reardon. Reardon. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
And so, Philip comes and asks him for money and help and stuff. And so Hank will give it to him. And well, I think I'm not sure if that's even an injustice, but where is the virtue turning into a liability there? Like,
Well, first, I don't think that's even an example of trying, or how are they bringing, well, to answer the question first, how is the good person being inflicted some sort of deprivation? Let's just start with that to begin with. What's the deprivation of the good here? Or what is the good being deprived of? Or what is he seeking to deprive Reardon of?
money. But like to read in, that's
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. Whether I'm trying to
Or even like,
figure out.
okay, well, yeah, I guess, well, I mean, I can see in some cases that, well, actually, no. Okay, let's say, let's use this example. Maybe it's easier. There is a, um, there is a violent person and he's released from prison early on the basis of mercy, even though if you were applying justice, his sentence should have been 15 years. We're just making that up. But he was released
Yeah.
within 3 years. Where in that case is, so I understand now there may be innocent victims because of this act of mercy, and then there may be more of them, but where in this process has virtue been turned into a liability and evil into an asset? Like he's evil, but how is that an asset? Like I don't see how that helps him. And I don't see where in that process virtue, wherever that is in that example, has been turned into a liability. I'm just, that's where I'm stuck.
Well, we're talking about ignoring and reversing the principle and therefore suffering the consequences. That's the choice people can make. They can decide, I'm going to suffer the consequences. And maybe they're going to suffer the consequences by failure to consider the issue. Like they're not even thinking about the issue, or they're outright evading the issue. The consequence of that is always going to deprive the good of something by choosing to suffer the consequences of a principle. Or even if you didn't mean to, it's like the fact that it was the consequences afflicted some harm on the good, inflicted harm or deprivation on someone that is good. So I'm trying to think of a case where somebody knew or ignored a principle or just suffered the consequences for their mistake. You got me so far?
Uh, I'm finding this pretty hard. So,
Well, just thinking about suffering the consequences. Like you either accept the principle or go against it and suffer the consequences.
yes, okay. On an individual level.
Yeah, whatever it might be, you're
Yeah,
just
okay.
the result of a failure of an action, or even if you made the mistake, the result is
Yeah,
this consequence.
sure.
The consequence is bad for men who are good. And you might only discover that afterwards. Say, like, you did something really bad that you, I don't know, plagiarized a paper and didn't think it was bad at the time for the consequences. And now you see what the consequences are. That it's bad. We even say that plagiarism is bad because it's inflicting harm upon the men who are good. Say the person who originally wrote the paper, you are inflicting a deprivation on them to affect or allow control the um, fruits of their labor. That plagiarizing is a who produced it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And then,
And the person
so,
harmed the good. That's what's harmed.
right. But then why does, like, virtue is still virtue and evil is still
Yeah.
evil? It's still negative. So why does virtue then become like their virtue, then why is their virtue a liability and someone else's evil has suddenly an evil? I'm just confused. Like,
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm just making sure
okay,
the
yeah,
steps are clear, that each step my reasoning is clear.
got it.
So by inflicting deprivations on those who are good, we're conferring value to those who are not good, or in some way those who act against value, whether it might be, I don't know, your current conferring value or rewarding the consequences of bad actions, or you're adding value to those actions, like say, like what, I mean, think what would plagiarism promote? I mean, you're harming the good person. What is it promoting? What unvirtuous thing is it promoting? Like, or what would you say is unvirtuous about that? Or what's it affecting?
So I know the person who put in the effort is not being rewarded,
Yeah.
and you're getting credit from other people for um, for something that maybe you didn't have a big role in or didn't do yourself.
Well, let's consider even more concretely. Like, if somebody's crediting you with this great idea, they think it's yours because you put your name on it.
Yeah.
What would that say? What are you acquiring through this lie that you've made?
What am I requiring
Or
for people?
acquiring, I said. What are you acquiring by doing that? What do you get when you plagiarize? Or why would a person might think this is
Oh,
like,
like
what is
fame,
the consequences?
fame, like good reputation, maybe opportunities for work. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, those are desirable things, but what are they being given to? Like, it's be given to you, but on false pretenses. They're being given to you for things you actually didn't accomplish. You aren't receiving what you deserve. You're not the value here. Like, or it's hard example here because you're the one receiving the value. What's being given value here is uh, the dishonest is being given value. The
Yeah.
falseness is given support or wealth, or
Right.
rather than the person who deserves it. In a way, what is happening here? It's like by changing these rules of reality that you've deliberately on purpose tried to flip the usual course of value, that somebody who writes something gets what they deserve. They get the credit, they get the support, they get the recognition. You're turning that virtue of telling the truth, the virtue of being honest about the facts and giving credit to the person who came up with the idea. That virtue of honesty is given sort of a liability by needing to plagiarize. That the honesty itself prevents is that the evil is the asset, that dishonesty is now the asset here because you're forcing yourself to, or you're the one acquiring the benefits of writing something.
Without effort.
Yeah, you've subverted, you flipped how this should work. You're trying to say here, like, if you didn't acknowledge this mistake, you would be saying that you might realize, God, I can't believe what I did. I'm seeing that the person who made this isn't getting what they deserve, that my lie to get myself something has actively harmed the honesty of, or as actively harmed my honesty and the harmed justice, or prevented you from acting justly. And you could think even more broadly, by lying or depriving them of their value, how does that affect even the system as a whole? Like, if you plagiarized within the system of, say, science, and a lot of people rather and cite each other, what does it say about the system, or what do you cause to happen once you start plagiarizing and not giving credit where it's due? There might be even wider implications that this virtue of being honest has not been turned into a liability, that you've reversed everything.
Okay. I will need to think about this more. I've got another question related to this. So if that's true, then does that mean if you don't, because it says here just above, you know, we're not just focused on punishing the negative. There is a truth, obviously, behind an eye for an eye, but the most important part of justice is rewarding the good. And that might mean giving thanks, gratitude, recognition, acknowledgement. Yeah. So if I don't do those things, if I don't give acknowledgement, but I assume virtue is a default state. So if someone does something really nice or they write some amazing book and I love it, but I don't comment, am I also in the same way turning virtue into a liability and evil into an asset? Does this same idea apply?
What do you mean? What's the idea of what that?
So in this case, we're saying this idea is that if you don't punish the evil, if you don't punish the evil and make the payment that evil demands, then you're actually turning virtue into a liability and evil into an asset if it's not punished, right?
Yeah.
And so then I'm wondering if the reverse is true, meaning if I don't reward the good, I'm not even concerned with the evil at this point. If I don't pay recognition or like say thanks to someone or give gratitude, am I also doing the same thing of turning virtue into a liability and evil into an asset? Does it only apply in the case of not punishing evil, or does it also apply in the case of me not recognizing and rewarding the good?
I think the implication would be that it would apply both directions.
Because that has interesting implications, right? Because suddenly I'm saying, let's say I went to the dentist yesterday and they had like a trainee dentist and he was really good. He made so much effort and he was very like great at communication. And I intentionally said, all right, if I apply justice, I'm going to intentionally thank him when this head dentist comes in and say why, like he was so great. But if I didn't do that, am I now that like you see suddenly if it's true that I'm somehow turning virtue into a liability and evil into an asset, it would have massive implications on the way I should conduct myself as far as like those situations go and when you should give recognition and thanks. But anyway, it's not, I mean, even the case of if you don't punish evil, it's not, I mean, I'm starting to see how you can be reversed.
We might word it differently. We might want to word it differently. I don't think, I mean, you're not necessarily rewarding evil by not recognizing the good, but you're not benefiting the good. You're not giving them what they deserve. And that would have implications on, I mean, would it reward the evil in the world? I'm not, but it could say, by not rewarding the virtuous, evil can only overtake that. Or that if you don't reward the virtuous, if you don't provide value, if you don't exchange value when you receive value, that you are somehow paving the way for evil to take place. That's how I would think of it, that you need to actively think about conferring value to others and actively think about supporting that. Because if you think about it this way, we want to confer value on to deprive the bad in a way. Because this is doing
Say that again.
bad.
We want to confer value because.
Well, think of it this way. This case is by inflicting good on the bad, we've made the good receive bad. Or maybe I'll rephrase it. You're depriving the men who are good and giving value to those who are bad. You would rather deprive the men who are evil and confer value to those that are good.
Yeah.
So if you're not conferring values to the good, you're not depriving the evil. You're not acting against evil. You're just maybe middle of the road. You're just are neutral. You're not even a force for good. You're nothing. You rather.
Is there such a thing?
Is there? Probably not. I would think you should actively keep in mind what's the good act to support it, because that will improve your life more than doing nothing. And of course, ethically speaking, our goal is to help ourselves flourish, not just survive well enough. But if we want to flourish, then we would also want to deprive the bad from bad and give the good to the good.
Okay.
That's how I think of it.
Right. So maybe it doesn't apply in the case of if you don't recognize the good. It's not like virtue is turned into a liability. It's just not, well, I don't know. I think, yeah,
I'm
this
not sure if
is,
you'd call it a liability there, but it
yeah,
certainly isn't. You certainly aren't using, we're certainly not using virtue as an asset. You're not using it for anything really. You're not even using it in a way. You want to use it.
mm,
Virtue is an asset when you're acting good, obviously. Like you want virtue to be the asset. And if it's an asset, you are doing the opposite here. So if you
well,
don't give,
okay. Yeah,
go
go on.
ahead.
Sorry.
I didn't have an idea after that. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I think, okay, when you start concretizing it, like, okay, if there is someone has a virtue and we're saying that virtue is their character and you admire their character, so you reward them with friendship. It's in that scenario, it's hard to think of like, well, there wouldn't be such thing as you just wouldn't reward them and then nothing else would happen and that would be in a vacuum. Like if you're the kind of person who doesn't reward that as a virtue, then there's got to be something else going on in your life. Like, who else are you friends with? Like, who do you spend your time with? If it is an actual value to you, I don't even know if that's possible. But then,
Yeah,
if that's true, then how does it apply in the tiny little subtle cases, like a simple recognition or a thanks versus not giving it? Like, there's got to be the same principle must apply, but it's hard to imagine what are the consequences of me just not giving a small thanks to someone. I don't know. Like
that's hard to
that's
say. That's really hard. I mean, I could make some arguments that it's part of habituating a benevolent attitude of rewarding the good when the good has occurred. Like you make the little things become your habit too. That's the only thing I can think of really though. You start out small and keep building up from
yeah,
there.
okay. Okay. Maybe I don't have enough depth of knowledge to, this is pretty still, even with that latter example, it was still pretty, the examples you gave helped, but for some reason in my mind, there's still that sense of doubt. Um, yeah. So
In a
revisit it, I think.
way, I think in practical terms, just saying thank you is a very important step into recognizing how to reward the good. I think people neglect rewarding the good even when they feel it's deserved. And I think it can start as simple as saying thank you when you truly feel um, thankful. Like I didn't do that the other day, and I felt bad when I didn't. And I was with my mom at the time, and she thanked the person for me. I was glad she did that, but and I confirmed that like that's what I wanted. But usually I try to say thank you when I feel gratitude towards someone and feel that they've done a good job. But it's easier to start to see what's good when I actually regard it and act on it when I see it,
Right.
when I act on rewarding the good.
Yeah. I mean, it is a very interesting, this topic is interesting for that. I mean, it's interesting also in terms of evil, but it is interesting from the perspective of the emphasis on rewarding the good and what that means in down to the tiniest gesture of like you're at a counter and the worker in the grocery store is smiling and happy and she's like genuinely you know, asking how you are and everything, and it's like a person doesn't reach, like everyone else is kind of dreary and upset, and just like a person doesn't reach that kind of character for no reason. And so even just dropping a little compliment, like I just thinking about the implications for that are interesting, like as far as actual justice goes, is yeah,
Yeah,
anyway, there's a lot in this, I think.
yeah, there is a lot.
uh Oh, so I think this is the same issue I'm having. Like, but let's see what it says in this passage. Oh, so it's the same thing. I wonder what I was doing. Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
must have got lost in that, but same issue, same question. Oh, do you know anything about retributivists versus utilitarians?
Um, I don't know much about this, philosophically
Okay,
speaking.
all
I
right,
only know it so far as he's describing it. I don't know it any further than that.
all right. Um, let's have a look. The long range consequences of an action can be predicted only by means of principles, and principles can perform this function. Dessert. It's always weird. Whenever I read that, I just think of like a cupcake. As the one schools insist is an absolute. Okay. So I guess principles don't really predict the future, but they're more like they are in the guide to action, right? That's the way to think of it. And going forward, they help you in future scenarios where certain contexts are present. But it's a manner of speaking when you're just saying it's not a, it's it's more, I don't know if you can even think about it in terms of the future, but it's more like just a tool used that more scenarios come up and you can apply the same tool and it helps you live, and that's it, right? I don't know if there's anything more to say about that, really. That's just my confusion on this prediction thing. But
I think he's just, the point here is just that you can decide, like, somebody steals, therefore it means you get your hand chopped off. Doesn't matter why you did it, when you did it, who you stole from. If you've done it, you get your hand chopped off. That's the retribution. That's the rule. Or utilitarian might be that, like, is thinking more in terms of how do you change the person to act differently because you want a different consequence. It doesn't matter what they did, it's just you think in terms of the consequence that you might whip them 30 times because you think it discourages them from committing it again. It's not because the action itself is inherently wrong, but that you want to discourage the action. So you just whip them,
okay,
for example. That would be more what he
okay,
means maybe utilitarian here. They're only thinking in terms of how do you change the consequence? Or you're only worried about the consequence of their actions, not about the thing they did so much. Like you
fine,
want to instill social order. So you whip somebody as an example, don't disobey the law, something like
okay,
that. Because it's not actually thinking about justice, it's not thinking about what does the person deserve, or what's the context say, what's the reason for enacting justice. It's not
right.
merely the rules, it's not merely the consequence.
Okay, I also skipped this question because I know what the answer to that is. So I was interested in this. What do you think of morality as man's motive power? What does that mean? Like, what?
Your standard of value, I think, it's the very standard of what you think,
Oh, it's good or
what
bad.
motive,
What you think is good or bad determines what you do. Is that
or as a heavy influence, a really big motive power. Like if life is
right?
the standard of value, that like that's your purpose, that's your motive
Oh,
for existing,
okay.
or whatever terms you think in, whoever it might be. I mean, if it was a different standard, then it would change your motivations in life, or your ultimate standard of value, I guess. The ultimate value is really what it affects.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense then. If it determines what you think is good or evil, what you go against, what you're for.
Yeah.
Let's see what this is. Well, I mean, I think this is off topic, this question, but I guess the proof would be so it is. I do know if you speak to people when they think of justice, their first thing that comes to mind is definitely punishing the evil. Why that is, I don't know, but it is the case. And so I mean, proof might consist of historical analysis or whatever, which is irrelevant to
Yeah,
this.
I'm not aware of any of it. I
Yeah.
just agree, though. My day-to-day observation is that that's the first thing people go to when they
Yeah,
think
I
justice.
agree with that too. Yeah. Okay, and this is one of application, which we sort of touched on. We don't know yet as far as implications for little things like giving thanks or gratitude, which is something definitely worth exploring because that's super interesting, but skip it for now. I think this might be the same question. Where do you know of any discussions on this kind of thing?
The best example I'm come up with is the moral or normative ethics by Tara Smith.
Oh, I
She talks
normally
about
that.
benevolence,
Okay.
but I don't really know any specific discussions on benevolence and things like that, or rewarding the good for being the good. I don't know much
Yeah.
about that.
Let's see. I'm just checking out what this question is about. Oh, they're saying, okay, so they do. All right. So this is about, it's important to tell Kant that he's rejected reality and is wrong, but it's more important to tell Aristotle that Aristotle finds someone who understands that he has recognized reality and is right. Firstly, what does it do for what does it do for, how do we know what it does for a person when we tell them they're right versus when we punish evil? Like, what if we didn't tell Aristotle he was right and we just punished Kant and didn't give him the cookie in the cookie jar? Like, how do I know? I mean, this makes sense to me. Like, I think it's good to do that, but I'm like, how do I know what the consequences of not doing it are?
Is it going to? That's kind of, how do you induce this principle or this idea that rewarding the good produces more good consequences?
Yeah, maybe that's my question.
It's hard to think of a philosophical reason. I can't come up with a philosophical reason. I really just go to, just when I observe people, that people enjoy using good behavior, or people enjoy being rewarded. People enjoy receiving value for what they did. And it really does motivate people. It's hard for me to say why. Why does it work better to reward somebody, to reward a child than to hit them? I mean, that's just a fact. Kids turn out better when you don't hit them to get them to do what you want. They do better when they're rewarded for positive reinforcement. I
Right.
can't come up with a philosophical reason why that is, other than it's something I've tended to observe. I probably should validate that more that I think about it. Why do I know that's the case? Rather than assuming doing good makes people react good. Like, I need something more to validate that, I think.
Yeah, me too. And what do you think of this? I think I linked it to something else. So something else in the text, which is the conventional view of justice being consists primarily in punishing the wicked, which we both agree with. And then he says, I found this interesting. This idea stems from evil being metaphysically powerful, while virtue is impractical idealism. I'm not sure if it's this from this exact text, but that seems to make sense to me. That like that's why justice is concerned with punishment, because sort of like because the evil is what's powerful, and so that's what you need to fight.
Yeah. But I kind of go back to thinking punishment is a disvalue. I mean, I think that's part of it. Like, even just before we said punishment's a disvalue.
Right.
And I do think a disvalue has implications for that. Using disvalues to change or encourage behavior is immoral. I think that might even be an implication of that you should use other methods. If you're considering using a disvalue to get a certain action, in a way you're encouraging, like you almost be implicitly saying these negative things are powerful. They cause change. They are potent enough that they will change behavior in a lasting,
Oh, okay.
desirable way.
All right. I think I get what you're saying. So you're saying that if you're trying to inflict a disvalue on someone, you're trying to discourage or encourage a certain behavior. And the only reason you'd be concerned with encouraging or discouraging a behavior is if it has some impact on you, right?
Yeah.
And so there's an issue here where we recognize that evil can have an impact on us, but we're limited in our vision of being able to see the impact of the good, because it's like, you know, in the economics, there's that concept of the invisible, not the invisible hand, but what you don't see. So you're like, oh, things are fine, you know, there's all these laws or whatever, and like, but what if the laws were changed and now there would be like 10 times more things and life would but you can't see that. So maybe it's that kind of, I don't know how to explain that, but maybe it's some of that. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure. I'm really just focusing on that when you get people thinking about disvalues, they're not really thinking about value acquisition or value enhancement or flourishing. They're really just thinking about avoiding the disvalue because it's something undesirable. It's not seeking a goal, but rather avoiding a consequence, which I think, oddly enough, it seems that abuse or things like that, or even not even abuse, but just this more punishment oriented way of thinking, people don't turn out better for that. That people
Right.
do turn out better when you encourage and punishments, even not even abusive ones, just like, oh, just go to your room because you got a C on your test. Like, I mean, that's a punishment, but it's not really abuse, really. But it's not something that's going to change their actions for the better. You're only really encouraging, showing them, don't do this and this will happen. It's not showing them the right actions. It's not showing them how to behave better. It's not even showing anything. It's just showing, avoid this because it's bad.
Right.
And you're not encouraging the better actions or the better way of thinking.
Okay. That just reminded me. There was a story I heard. I think I can't remember where I got it from. I either read it in an article or something from Brandon, or I don't know. It was about a tribe, and I don't know if it was made up. You may have heard of it because I'm pretty sure it's from one of these books. A tribe that, or maybe you told me about it. I can't
read
even
it.
remember. You told
I
me
don't think
about it, I think.
you. Maybe I read it though. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I know
Where
exactly.
as someone who's done something bad.
That was in his essay, The Hazards of Objectivism, I believe.
Okay.
And he was saying it was a bad habit within objectivist circles to focus on the things you've done wrong and condemning people for what they've done wrong. And as that is some belief that's the way you should act, but it's not really actually a psychologically beneficial thing. When we look at what people do, it doesn't help. It actually increases those infractions. It makes it worse.
I remember reading it in the Efficient Thinking book then by Barbara Brandon, and he mentioned it. But then is he saying that applies to justice? Because that would completely flip it on its head. It would say you don't punish the wicked. You actually try and do something else. I can see how like the application on a personal level would be your orientation towards yourself and mistakes you've made, or not mistakes, but like bad things you've done, and then trying to change yourself. I can see how that there may be something in relation to that. But is that supposed to apply to justice as well? Because how does that work? Because then suddenly you're not punishing with disvalues anymore. I don't really know.
You might need some of both. I mean, I don't. Let's say, do we want punishment? I don't. I mean, righting the wrong, I think, is a more appropriate way to think of it. You are undoing what had caused the damage that had been caused, or you're making a compensation for it. Like if you stole X amount of money, you should have some proportional consequence for it. But it's not so much a punishment as much as righting the wrong. I think
But
that's different than causing.
only
Like,
the violator, only the violator can right the wrong. So how does this circle
right.
thing, I can see its value, but how does that fit into justice? Like,
I think it just can bring to the idea that getting people to act better isn't simply punishing them. In fact,
okay, I
punishing isn't
understand.
really a way to change behavior. And at least if you're in a group of people that presumably care about each other, they don't want to
Yeah,
just punish them. They want them to be better because
right,
it improves everybody around them.
right,
Everybody gets better from it. So you don't want to
right.
just like condemn them and then now they're going to do it more and make it worse and
Right.
increase hostility and blah, blah, blah. Then just everything
Mm.
gets worse.
Yeah, but yeah, that's interesting too, to tie that in also to like I said, I wonder if this whole thing has application to how you treat yourself or talk to yourself as well. And that example you gave also,
Mhm.
that's very